With economic inflation rising at an unprecedented rate, the world of wristwatches has become an even more expensive interest to have, especially with brands like Seiko completely restructuring model ranges and most watches doubling in price. So the more these prices rise, the more attractive all the watch models become. Today we take a look at 5 discontinued watches that still offer incredible value. Now, a few ground rules to mention before we get into the watches. Firstly, as these are discontinued models, they're of course a little harder to obtain. You can't just head over to authorized dealers and pick them up brand new. Some grey market retailers like Joma Shop and Creation Watches may stock them. However, you might have to look on places like eBay and Chrono24 to get some good deals. But remember, only buy from sellers with lots of good feedback. Next, I will provide links in the description to buy the watches new if possible. Finally, I'll mention a price range for every watch that you should look to pay. Try and stick to this range if you want to get the best value. So before we get into my top 5 picks, I thought I'd give a quick honourable mention to the Oris Titanium Field. I've been singing the praise of this watch for a couple of years now, and for good reason. It's a very wearable titanium field watch packed with great specs and features for less than $100. This watch was actually discontinued last year and seemed near impossible to get hold of. However, Oris recently reissued the watch, with a few cosmetic changes, but still has all of that charm and materials as the first discontinued model. The older discontinued models sell for around $70, and the new reissue you can pick up for around $80. As this model is technically no longer discontinued, I couldn't feature it in today's list. However, the watch is just too good value not to feature. With such little price discrepancy between the discontinued and the reissue, I'd definitely say go for the new version and enjoy a lightweight, super fun titanium watch. Okay, enough messing around, let's talk watches. Kicking off today's list, we have a stunning model from the old school Seiko 5 range. Even in 2023, there's still tons of models from this discontinued range that offer incredible value. However, there is one model that I've personally owned and was really impressed with. That is the Seiko 5 SNKL 83. This particular model manages to pull off a sporty yet dressy look all on one black dial. This is achieved by the red seconds hand, giving the watch a sporty racing car kind of vibe, but with the polished bezel, concentric circular dial pattern, and the stepped case giving some dressier design cues. This watch is what we call an absolute strap monster. It works on a range of different NATO straps, from flamboyant to plain Jane, and even works on more elegant leather straps too, meaning that this particular Seiko 5 is probably one of the most versatile models from the old school Seiko 5 range. As usual with Seiko, we have smaller wearing dimensions, with a 38mm case diameter and a 10mm thickness, which means the watch wears comfortably, coming in at that sweet spot of wearability. As with all the old school 5s, we get the iconic in-house Seiko 7S26 automatic movement, with a day-date complication and a long history of working hard and not needing much care or attention. One huge benefit of the SNKL 83 is the lume. It's simply crazy on this model, stronger than any other Seiko watch that I've owned. Often I'd wake up at 4 AM and the watch was still glowing away. Thankfully, this model is still available on grey market websites like Joma Shop and Creation Watches, although I suspect that won't be the case for much longer. You should be looking to pay around $100 for this model, and at that price, the watch is just ridiculously good value. Okay, let's move on. You might think that you can't pick up a big brand like Oris for under $500. Well, check this one out. Oris is another brand that in recent years has entered the entry-level luxury market, where most models cost upwards of $1,000. However, if we look back in the Oris catalogue, we can find some absolute gems. One model I really love, so much so that I picked up myself, is the Oris Big Crown 3. This is a stunning 35mm pilot's watch from the early 2000s. You might think that because it isn't a super modern watch that we have to sacrifice in the quality. However, this is far from the truth. The Big Crown 3 has a sapphire crystal, an incredibly thick and substantial stainless steel case, and a workhorse ETA automatic movement. The watch features a vertical day-date complication, with the Oris logo actually sitting down at the 6 o'clock. Above the 12 o'clock we have the iconic 2 dots, representing and confirming that this is indeed a pilot's watch. The dial layout is unusual, but completely original to Oris and absolutely stunning in my opinion. As hinted in the model name, we have a large crown, which makes the manual winding experience a pleasure. Even the case of the Oris Big Crown 3 is unique, with long lugs, a thick bezel and a very angular construction. The finishing is completely brushed, which adds to the tool watch aesthetics. If you fear the 35mm case is too small, fear not, the Oris BC3 actually comes in a 40mm case diameter too. This model originally retailed for around $1,000. However, as these models are quite old now, can't pick them up brand new, that allows for some absolute bargains on the secondary market. These models are frequently for sale on eBay and Chrono24, where you should be looking to pay around $300 to $500 depending on condition and size. Getting into a very respected and sought after brand such as Oris for this price is unquestionably incredible value. Okay, so coming up next, we do have a watch that you can still buy brand new, and it's an absolute killer of a watch. One brand I still think is massively underrated is Citizen. For some reason, they just don't get the same love as the likes of Seiko and Tissot, but for me, are creating just as good, if not better value watches. One model that is an absolute little darling is the Citizen Nighthawk. This model is now around 15 years old, but still somehow manages to beat most modern aviation watches. The Citizen Nighthawk features a highly desirable GMT function, meaning we have the ability to track 2 different time zones at the same time, if you didn't already know. It does this, however, in such a unique and stylish way, that being with the double-sided central GMT hand. This hand has 2 different lengths, which take turns every 12 hours to display the time in the second time zone. They have a playful aeroplane tip, which for me rounds off this piece as the ultimate aviation tool watch. As you can see, we have a very busy dial. To some, I'm sure a bit too busy, but to the right people, this watch just makes you forget about buying anything else. Surprisingly, we have dive watch capabilities even though this is an aviation GMT watch, coming in with a 200 meters water resistance rating. So if you don't like the look of a traditional dive watch, you don't even have to own one. This Nighthawk will take care of you during those wet activities. When I think about pure value in wristwatches, this Citizen just ticks every single box. The construction is fantastic. Solid end links, tapering bracelet and a milled clasp. You don't see these kinds of specifications anymore with modern watches from big brands. Throw in the GMT function and the high water pressure capabilities, this is a genuine tool watch that looks effortlessly stylish. And the good news is, Joma Shop still sells these for around $250. But if you look to the secondary market, you can pick them up for as little as $150. We featured plenty of tool watches so far on today's list, so let's switch things up and take a look at something that's a little bit more dressy. Another sweet spot in the discontinued watches world is Christopher Ward, a brand that nowadays is creating beautiful, well-built watches that start around the $1,000 mark. However, like Oris previously, if we dive into their back catalogue, we can find some treasure. And if I had to speculate, these older models are probably going to be very collectible in the future. With Christopher Ward moving on to bigger and more impressive things, collectors will look back at where the brand started. The model range I'm highlighting today is the Malvern series. These come in a range of different styles and sizes, from fun chronographs to slim dress watches. The model I personally picked up recently was the Christopher Ward Malvern 595. This is a stunning minimalist dress watch with a very cool party trick up its sleeve. The Malvern 595 gets its name from this piece only being 5.95mm thick. Now you might think surely that has to be quartz, right? Wrong. This watch features a manual wind ETA 7001 movement that allows this to be one of the slimmest modern watches in the affordable watch market. Flip the watch over and view the beautiful movement through the display caseback. When us watch reviewers talk about watches disappearing on wrist, nothing quite comes as close as a watch that is this thin. It's almost like wearing a sheet of paper. But we still get a sapphire crystal and a case that doesn't feel like it'll break after a few knocks. However, it is the whole Malvern range that I'm highlighting here. Even the quartz chronographs are great value. The fact that you can get into a huge brand like Christopher Ward for this sort of price range is magnificent, and something that I encourage. Speaking of, you can expect to pay anywhere from $150 to $400 for these watches, depending on the movement, size and the colour of the watch. Just take a look at some older second-hand Christopher Ward models on eBay. You'd be surprised at not only how cool they are, but also how much value they offer. Okay, time for the final watch on today's list. This one is super fun and by one of the biggest and most recognisable watch brands in the world, Tag Heuer, a brand that doesn't get enough respect in the online watch community. People see quartz and a $1,000 price tag and immediately dismiss the whole brand as cheap rubbish. However, Tag is a watch brand rich in history and does actually create some very good watches. These watches are actually the oldest on today's list, but I'd argue they're the coolest too. Today I'm highlighting the Tag Heuer Formula 1. This is a range of watches from the early 90s that are super sporty and a hell of a lot of fun. These are smaller watches coming in with a 34mm case diameter, but of course that means for a very comfortable wearing experience. These watches feature a large plastic bezel, and most models have flamboyant colours covering the watch. Some models come with a lovely Jubilee bracelet too, and all of them have sapphire crystals. We have a classic dive watch design with the Mercedes hands, and even though these are almost 30 years old, they don't look too outdated, and they definitely look stylish. All of these models are quartz, which is actually a good thing when buying a watch this old, meaning that servicing them is as simple as swapping out the battery and throwing it back on your wrist. This watch is an amazing alternative to something like the Moonswatch. We get playful colours, a lightweight construction, however the watch is actually built well. Featuring a 200 meters water resistance, these vintage little Tags are genuine dive watches. Luckily, Tag sold an absolute boatload of these back in the 90s, meaning that there are still thousands for sale year round. You can expect to pay anywhere from $100 to a few $100 depending on condition, and if you're willing to spend a few hundred, you'll get an absolutely stunning, very cool watch. So getting into a brand as good and as big as Tag Heuer for just a couple of hundred, in my opinion, represents great value. Here's my final advice. advice. When looking at buying a vintage watch model, it's hard not to pull the trigger on the first one that you see, but stay patient. Wait for the colour, style and version that you want. Don't overpay just for the sake of having it. And finally, make sure you're careful. Buy the seller and not the watch. If you liked this video, then be sure to watch my video here on screen on 10 underrated affordable watches enthusiasts should know.